Since I'm going after the compressor, I'm going to have to take this fan off and the shroud. I'll unplug this harness. And I'm going to have to set up some tools to get this clutch fan nut loose. Got the fan broke loose. Just put a crescent wrench on it real quick and hit it with a sledgehammer to the passenger side. Seemed to do alright this time. And take two 10mm bolts out of the top of the fan shroud on each side. Got a little hook in the middle. I took the radiator cap off. I'm going to take a hose and drain some of the antifreeze off down below this upper radiator hose. I'll be taking this clamp loose and twisting the hose upright to give some clearance for this shroud to come up. Okay, got everything set up. I drained the antifreeze down below the fill neck and slip the transmission lines out of the fan shroud. The fan and the shroud's going to come up at the same time because it's kind of hooked to this deal here. Let's make sure it's got clearance. I got the fan unthreaded off the water pump. Just pull back on the radiator some to give it clearance. And make sure your lines are out of their holders. Go ahead and pull this up out of there. Let's tilt the radiator back some. Hold on to the fan and the shroud both. Come up out of there. And that's an outfit there. Alright. Yeah, but that's it. And again, got another big hole opened up. It's looking pretty good. That's a jewel. I'm going to go ahead and stick a 3/8 ratchet in that square hole and pry this tensor down and get the belt off. Mark the direction the belt's going if you want. If you want to reuse it anyway. I went ahead and took the 10mm bolt out of this low pressure line right above the compressor and the nut off the holder over here on the passenger side of the engine below this variable cam timing solenoid. Got a nut on it and set them on top of the engine. I just want the line flopping around when I take the bolt out of the compressor for it. And I took an air hose and blew all the loose debris off from the compressor. And I went ahead and unplugged the electrical connector down the side of the compressor. I fished a standard 3/8 drive long extension behind the lower radiator hose with a deep well 15mm to get the line block loose. There's a nut holding those both lines down to the compressor. I'm going to go ahead and stick a ratchet on it and break it loose. I just took the whole mess up out of there and off of the evaporator, and there's the dryer bottle. There's the loose line. There's a block to the air conditioning compressor. Has a high pressure switch on it, and there's the line going to the condenser on the driver's side, and that'll give me some room to look around. Big holes open up now, and there should be 4 bolts left on the compressor holding it to the engine. I may take that out of the pulley out of the way. I really got a mess now. Be sure watch for dying compressor oil leaking out of the lines. It'll be a mess. I went ahead and took the lower two bolts loose. You can get them easily from underneath or reach them from up top. And we'll go ahead and take these top two out. I've got most of the bolts out of the compressor. I've got the top two pretty loose. I know there's a couple loose bolts and the engine mount looks like back there. I screwed the front one down, the back one, the back bolt's still walking out. But that bolt there was out as far as that back one. I screwed it in behind. That back one's a little harder. Get the compressor out of there. I think I'll tighten that up. I was holding the engine up on this side partially. Put a floor jack between the oil pan and the differential, and put a piece of 3/4 inch plywood about 8 by 8 inches square, and raise the engine up about a half, 3/4 inch. Flip the compressor around so that the pulley's facing out, and then worked it out and got it out from underneath of that idler support bracket. And that did pretty good. I went ahead and took the idler pulley off to see what was happening, and it's pretty close in there. If you raise the motor up off the mount, turn the jack down. I'll let the jack down. See how much it drops. And that's all you need. So slide it out of there. It won't come out of there until you raise the motor, unless you take the other 3 bolts out of this bracket. I didn't want to have to fool with that mess. And it's a jewel. A big old boy. I've got the evaporator flushed out. And you have to use flushes that are specifically designed to not leave residue behind, because it can interfere with the operation of the compressor. And I flushed all the lines out that I'm going to be reusing, and they're all clean. All the dye and oils out of the evaporator, and it was pretty much flush the evaporator and let stuff set a couple minutes, and then slowly use the air hose to push the old stuff out until most of it's out. Then you open the air hose full wide, and then flush it again and wash all the lines out. And then I'll be putting some new clean PHE oil on these sealing washers and slipping them on the end of the lines to their appropriate sized pipe, and then bolting the nuts back together on the lines. And I'll be fastening all the lines back to the evaporator and tightening the nuts down to 15 foot-pounds, and stick a new orifice tube in this expansion pipe. And the screen faces the front of the vehicle, and the O-ring goes back in. The part with the O-ring on it goes back, it gets pushed back in there. It's a little stiff. It'll have to be lubed up with PAG 46 oil and pushed back into this expansion tube. And even the sensors where they screw onto the Schrader ports, I got a new dryer bottle. It has a new O-ring on it, so this one doesn't need replaced. But I'll be changing the O-ring on the high pressure side sensor. It's right on, stacked on top of the AC compressor where the lines bolt on. This is a new dryer bottle. I'll leave all the lines capped up until you're absolutely ready to install it. Transferred this rubber grommet from the old one to this new one in the same position that it was on the old dryer accumulator, whatever you want to call it. And I'll have to unscrew this cap back here once it's installed and screw that low pressure switch onto it. It's a new O-ring. Make sure it's got a new O-ring either installed or installed. Never reuse the O-rings or sealing washers ever. They won't work again. Not reliably. This system holds 8 ounces of PAG 46 oil, and I'll be installing it. I'll put a few ounces in the compressor, a couple ounces in this dryer bottle, and a few ounces in the evaporator. Although the majority of the time they can say you can fill the compressor up with it or the dryer bottle, but I'm not one for slugging the compressor. The compressor instructions with this compressor, now this has a little bit of a nitrogen charge or something, and they want you to stand this compressor on its end for a couple minutes before installing it to make sure the oil gets to the front seal. Possible seal failure if that isn't adhered to. This compressor already has 3 ounces of oil in it, and I'm going to drain that oil out and then use this bottle that already has 8 ounces in it and distribute it to the system. And looks like I might have to just take this Allen head. It's holding. You have to take that loose real slow and let the pressure off. It's let it off of the suction side so the oil won't shoot out of it. And I'm going to have to change the stud over to it. And it looks like I got the same plug-ins. It came with a spare plug-in for a different type. But it looks like they're only changing over. Make sure the air gap's about 15 thousandths or so. Give or take a few. I slid a jack back under the motor between the oil pan and the front differential case. And put a 3/4 inch sheet of plywood on top of it. I raised the motor up about 3/4 of an inch. I'm going to slip the compressor back through between the frame and this idler pulley dust shield. And start slipping the bolts back into it. They tighten down to 37 foot-pounds. Make sure that the bosses are all flat and not gristled up. And again, if you've got 8 ounce bottle of oil, make sure the compressor's turned with these holes facing the ground, and rotate it occasionally to get the oil that may be supplied with the compressor out of it. You don't want to over oil the system. The whole system holds 8 ounces. Excess oil is bad, not enough oil is bad. I let this compressor set on its head for a few minutes, and I relieve the pressure off of this, and then turn the compressor upside down and collected 2.5 ounces out of it over a couple minutes, and rotating it occasionally and then rocking it back and forth. So I got 2.5 ounces out of it. So it was equipped with 3 ounces, so there's a 1/2 ounce still left in the compressor. And my 8 ounce bottle, I'll just leave a tablespoon or so out of it. As long as you're within the ballpark 1/2 ounce one way, I could put all 8 ounces in it without incident. Probably will. There'll probably be some residue left in the bottle at this place, almost 1/4 of an ounce maybe, but that'll work out. I'm gonna go ahead and pour about 1/3 of this little bottle back into the compressor and rotate it 7 or 8 times, make sure it's not locking up, and then cap it again and install this sucker. Put about 3 ounces in this unit back into it. So we'll come out of it was a little dingy anyway. I'd wash some of the manufacturing particles out of it, wouldn't it? It was kind of a little dark. I've poured just under half this bottle into the larger hole, and just a splash or two down into the bigger hole. This is the suction side, this is the high side. And cap this container back up pretty quick. I'm going to rotate this around a few times with this plug off and get the plug back in there to keep moisture intrusion down to a minimum. The dryer bottle's still capped up. I'm going to keep moisture out of it. This oil and that dryer bottle, the stuff in it, will suck up water like a sponge. I'm going to rotate this in a clockwise fashion. If you're in doubt, you put your thumb over the big hole. If it rotate it about a half turn, if it sucks your thumb down, you're doing it right. And this should build pressure on this side. Now the compressor went right in there. Just use this space between the idler pulley and the block and run the line passage through there so that the compressor mounting bolt holes are flush with the frame, and it'll fall right in there. You can go underneath and get access to the lower 2 bolts, or do it from up here or whatever, but get all 4 bolts started and ease them all down evenly. Like I say, make sure the bosses are cleaned off. You don't want it distorting the body on the compressor and causing a leak. But I'm tightening them down to 37 foot-pounds. They're not sticking up on any one side or the other. And I took an air hose and blew the loose debris off. The sealing plate's still on the compressor. And I'm going to fish the lines down just above it and then slip that plate off. I've transferred the stud to the compressor to hold this line block down. And I put a new ring under the high pressure switch. That'd be an optimum time to put a new switch on it as well. And the line's going to lay up here on this engine pulling bracket, mount there, and on the other side of the head. And just try to keep any debris from falling down into the holes of the compressor. Fed the line assembly down. Just make sure that this retainer is on this side of the engine mount and it doesn't get locked in behind it. And make sure it falls in the compressor square and even. And then the center nut tightens down to 24 foot-pounds. I've lifted the expansion tube up. It goes this side of the evaporator. I've poured about 2.5 ounces of oil down this pipe. I'm going to stick this orifice strainer back in there with this short part facing the evaporator and a screen facing the front of the vehicle. It'll go in this way. And like I say, all these fittings I've cleaned off one way or the other and got all the dirt out of them. But lube up your O-ring on this orifice tube, and it takes a little bit of doing, but it'll drop back down in there. Just twist around on it and push it back in there until it's submerged about a ½ inch. I've got the orifice tube pushed back. There's like another cutout section that kind of soft flush with. The liquid line will push it on down if it's not far enough. And I'm going to stick a plug in it. Mouse over the video and hit the circle I to continue to the next part of the video.